What's up, everyone? Welcome to the North Leeds Jitz podcast. Today on the show, joined by Professor Michael Trasso over in New Jersey, right?
Yep, New Jersey. Yep.
Awesome. I first saw you on your YouTube channel, The Merge, which I think is absolutely fantastic. I use it all the time for if there's something similar we're teaching in class that week, see what you've kind of taught about it. And so thanks for that resource. We're also joined by Coach Kev here, who's jumped on in lieu of Professor Mike. More handsome, if anything.
I'll suffer for that, thanks.
How are you doing today, Professor?
Good. Just got done teaching class here, and in between sessions, actually working on some content for a future or an episode we're releasing tomorrow, episode 97. So everything's good. Everything's well.
Nice. Amazing. I want to talk a fair bit about the YouTube channel. I'm really interested in about the way content's evolving and aiding martial arts. But for people that might not be familiar with your channel and stuff, can you give us a bit of background on yourself and how you came up with martial arts?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I started back in 1995 when I was about 5 years old in martial arts. I was initially looking for, some type, right? So my parents or my dad, we looked at, Taekwondo, karate, other kind of things, other kind of martial arts. And we wound up settling on JiuJitsu and grappling, right? The school we went to, they had a really good, I don't want to say sell, right? But they had a good sell in regards to, hey, if you get in a fight on the street or self-defense, most likely it's probably going to end up on the ground. So you might as well, know what to do from that side, right? And I'm not saying this in a bad way towards any other martial arts, but, knowing punches and kicks is awesome. But once you get taken to the ground, it's like, what do you do now? Right. Mm-hmm. So that was a sell that my father liked, where he's like, hey, let's get into the submission grappling aspect. Let's see how you like it. So I started at the very young age, doing that for about 8.5 years. And that was more of like a catch wrestling, sambo, Japanese jiu-jitsu style. And then I got more into the BJJ or Brazilian jiu-jitsu aspect around 13 years old or so. At that time, I already had some kind of wrestling background through middle school. Continued wrestling through high school and at the collegiate level. And jiu-jitsu was always in there, right? I think jiu-jitsu took a big back seat during my collegiate wrestling career, because that was like if you're playing any sport in college, you kind of have to dedicate yourself to it. Yeah. And, probably about like the 5-year range from 2008 to 2013 or so was like a 9 or 10 month dedication to wrestling. And then a 2-month session where I'd be working on the BJJ aspect in the summer. So, but to go into your question of the YouTube channel, The Merge, that was initially birthed from the idea of wrestling for jiu-jitsu, right? There's a lot of these athletes in a lot of these schools and a lot of just grapplers in general that know what to do when you're on the ground, but you have to get them there first, right? And pulling guard's awesome, right? I do it a lot. I do it all the time too, right? Especially in Ghee. But it's a critical aspect of not only defending takedowns, but also knowing how to take your partner to the ground. So I can go on forever about it. I'll try and keep it short for you guys, but it's just something that I got a lot of questions about. Folks knowing I was a college wrestler, a lot of times in either seminars or class, it's, hey, takedown question, wrestling question, and then, also jiu-jitsu question. But I found a lot of them were more wrestling based. So I thought, hey, why not share this knowledge with the world, since I know it's a common issue or thing that's surpassed or looked over in most gyms.
Yeah, for sure. I think probably even more so over here in the UK, where we don't really have a culture of wrestling. I mean, if you go far back enough, there's like catch wrestling kind of stuff, but there's no like in high school and primary school type ages, there's no like wrestling program you could jump in on. It's always like, football or soccer or cricket, that kind of thing. Yeah. Which cricket doesn't really prepare you for the grappling life so much.
Not so much. I bet it's fun though.
It's something Dan O'Hare talks about, isn't it? I saw him in a podcast. He's talking about sort of how he obviously got, reinvented the leg lock game, and his team kind of took it to that next level. But one of the things he's saying he wants to like master in his sort of later years is the takedowns and the more wrestling side, where he sees it as a massive weakness. So definitely something. I think we find that too, right? We do specific classes in that area because we find people.
For sure,
have the same issues.
Going back to life growing up, whereabouts are you from? Were you a good kid? Were you getting into fights? What was it like?
So no, I grew up in New Jersey here, northern New Jersey. I would definitely say I was a pretty a good kid growing up. I never really got in fights or anything like that. I always kind of had my head down, staying involved in sports. Had some friends, had I'd say pretty normal life, although I'm kind of generalizing normal life. But a lot of it was just very dedicated to martial arts, right? So, never was in that physical aspect of outside any kind of fighting, but always on the mats training.
Yeah, I think the people that did martial arts from a very young age, I think, tend to steer away from getting into fights and that kind of thing, especially later in life, for whatever reason, whether it be that kind of values philosophy or just knowing that how tough it is to fight, or just because you get rid of that ego part of you in the training room, right?
Yeah, I think so. And also just starting from such an early age, they were big on just the typical, discipline, respect, honor, stuff like that, right? So I think you just grow up kind of knowing like, hey, the stuff you're learning and you're training can really hurt someone. So you're not using it unless you absolutely need to. But don't get it wrong, right? Like between my father and training, it's like, hey, if you need to defend yourself, you're using it, right? And you're going full throttle. But if you don't need to, don't use it.
Absolutely. So what were your young aspirations? I know you obviously took your wrestling to a high level. Did you want to, does wrestling become a career later in life for many people, or did you have other aspirations to do something else?
It's a hard question because I was really wondering where my career or where I'd want to go with certain things. Typically after you're done wrestling in college, it's either, you're competing, more from like a financial monetary perspective. If you just want to go to random opens, feel free to, but it's not going to pay any bills. Usually you're wrestling at an Olympic level, right? You're doing something like that, or you're coaching, right? I coached for 2 years after, and high school and helping out at collegiate level as well. And unless you're really head coach or furthermore head coach of a very prestigious university or upper echelon type universities, the financial, it's usually a side job or a side job. So I kind of went more towards something that can help me become financially stable first before I took it to the route of opening my own school, since I've always wanted to open a school or my own gym since I was a little kid. But yeah, I would have loved to take my career further past that, but it was either Olympic level, which I wasn't doing, or coaching, and I wanted something more financially stable.
Amazing. So how long ago was it that you opened up your own school?
So we opened up about 5 months ago now. So I've been open since January 31st of this year.
No way. We kind of opened up just about a year and a half ago now, and it was like difficult times to open up, like mid COVID.
Wow.
Caught the similar kind of vibe on that. How's it been? What's it like? Were you a head instructor somewhere else before, or?
So before this, I was kind of going through timestamp, New Jersey, and then I got recruited to wrestle in college in Providence, Rhode Island, in 2008, and then I wrestled there until 2012. And then after having a job, getting some more financial stability, I decided to move to San Diego in 2016, and that's where I kind of went into more of the getting back into the professional scene or competing, as I say, professionally at a semi-professional level, since I still had a day job. So I was in San Diego in 2016 to 2020. And in that 4-year stint in San Diego, I was teaching at Gracie Humaita headquarters in Brighton, Brighton, Claremont. It's technically Claremont, Kearny Mesa, but I was teaching there for a couple of years.
Amazing. And how come you back home to New Jersey? Any particular reason you wanted to open the school there? Was it just give back to the community where you grew up, or was there another reason? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I have an extensive network here in the New Jersey area. My family's here. You know, I'm a big family guy, so I wanted to get back to family. I mean, at that point, 2008, 2020. Yeah, I mean, I was living away from home for about 12 years by that point, right? And yeah, I thought it was time to kind of get back to the nest and see family again. And when I told myself I wanted to open up a school and open up a gym, I always wanted to be in this area, right? San Diego, I mean, come on, right? It's beautiful. It's a great time. It's funny, like through the 4 years I was there, I still like never got out of the thought process of like, it's like a vacation land place. So I almost couldn't imagine myself like raising a family there. Because I want a family, right? I want to have kids. Yeah, it didn't seem like a place I wanted to settle down in, especially being far away from family. I missed the 4 seasons, right? Beautiful weather all year round is awesome, but believe it or not having that snow and that cold during Christmas was kind of almost like depressing. So yeah, between family and just kind of getting back to the roots, I wanted to get back here. Love it.
So when you opened up the academy, was that the similar time you started the YouTube channel?
So I started the YouTube channel. It's actually funny that, funny why I started that, besides the aspect of, having the knowledge and just wanting to help folks out. There's other places or other, channels on YouTube, Flow Wrestling, right? Behind the Dirt is a great channel for wrestling as well. That I followed, right? And I always saw him breaking down techniques, and I would kind of reach out with like a little like direct message saying, hey, this really cool highlight came out, you should break it down. I never wound up hearing back, right? But in my head, I'm like, you know what, between the competitive credentials from the jiu-jitsu side and the credentials from the wrestling side, and me having these, 20 plus years of knowledge, why don't I start doing this, right? Like, why don't I start making these, like doing these breakdowns, for example. And I thought about it as like a perfect marketing aspect before I opened a school. So at that time, I already understood and knew, hey, I'm gonna move back to Jersey in about a year plus. So why don't I start doing this for like a marketing perspective, so people can kind of understand who I am, how I teach, how I sound before I open. I think I had not light, but I just didn't know where I was going to go. Right. I'm like, hey, I'm going to start this channel, see what happens. And it took off pretty rapidly, not only in the US, but globally. I basically started for that reason, those 2 reasons. It's been wonderful since. So I started that September 2020, and then the school opened Jan 31, 2022. So it was kind of live for about almost a year and a half before I opened the school.
Amazing. Yeah, that's we had a very similar philosophy with the kind of content we were doing. Maybe not as a niche down as like wrestling kind of for jiu-jitsu, which I love, but it's more just kind of showing who myself and Professor Mike was when we were opening up the academy. So started doing things like the podcast, and we do some video every day in like lockdown and that kind of thing. And that worked really well for us, for the marketing side of things. Now, a year and a half later with over 400 students, it's really good for building that community once they're already established. We've had not only like, people like yourself, who are bigger in the wider jiu-jitsu community, but also just our own members who are, just sharing their stories, and that kind of gets people talking on the mats. And it's a really nice way to build that community together. But that being said, it's a lot of work. Like so maybe you can speak a bit to that, because you put out a lot of content, and it's really I'm not trying to flatter you too much here, but it's very well produced. Like, you always got a nice thumbnail. You can tell that you've spent some time in the editing process, obviously the pre-planning of it and all that kind of thing. Tell me about the process and the amount of work that goes into it.
The work is definitely a full-time job in itself. You said it all, right? I mean, between the planning, pre-planning, like sometimes more scripting for the breakdowns, down to the shooting, the editing, the thumbnails. Even down to small, you guys kind of know before an episode's released, I even make like a teaser that goes with it as well, to kind of show people like what it is and, check it out. It's a lot of work, right? I'd be lying to sit back saying that, it doesn't sometimes become a little overwhelming, just between, trying to run a business, the school, handling marketing for this and everything from that side. And then I basically have a side job online, between Instagram, YouTube, all that stuff. It's a lot of work. And I only scratch the surface, right? I mean, you see some of these professional, full-time social media, YouTube influencers. I mean, there's hours and hours and hours of videos online teaching you how to have better, whatever it is, metadata, search strings, thumbnails, like all these like little hacks. Yeah. And I don't have time to learn all that. Right. So I'm only scratching the surface, and I feel like it's overwhelming sometimes.
I very much know the feeling where it's like you could go into just an absolute black hole of like making like the perfect YouTube channel with like all the best thumbnails, and it's got like, the titles of the videos are all in relatable searches and all these kind of things. And it's tough because, like you say, you're running an academy at the same time. What kind of keeps you going with it?
I'll just say really quick, with me saying it's overwhelming, of course I love it, right? I mean, I love what I do every day. I love teaching. I love the content. It's awesome when I put a video out and someone's like, hey, this is great, I'm going to use this, or, I used this last week, this is awesome, thanks for the video. Like when I get good feedback, I love it. Like it feels amazing, right? But yeah, a lot of work, but I just want to make sure everyone knows when they're watching, I love the merch, right? I love the merch. I love doing it. It's a lot of work though.
Well, yeah, you wouldn't do that hard work if you didn't love it, I guess. That's why you're doing it, right? It's worth the effort.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I could often come in here and T's just like editing away and I just hear the same loop over and over again for an hour as he's just like getting the perfect sample.
For sure. So let's keep going on a bit more broadly about the wrestling for jiu-jitsu kind of stuff. Where do you feel the stand-up game is at a level right now in jiu-jitsu compared to where it maybe should be or could be?
The level, I mean, anytime, I think it's going to take a very long time, and of course, very long time, I'm trying to put numbers to it as I'm talking through it with you, but until we get jiu-jitsu guys wrestling like real wrestlers, and of course I say real wrestlers, like, I'm not going to say Olympic level, right? Let's give them something. I'll say even like college level, maybe. It's going to take a little bit, right? I think there's a different level of training. I think there's, it's a niche focus, right? It's like, if you want to just say, hey, I want the best, bottom game. I want the best, I don't know, Delahiva, spider, worm guard, all this. It's like, you have to specifically train in that, right? Jiu-jitsu is like a whole martial art where it's standing, top, bottom, the in-betweens, the gray areas, submission, sweeps, all that. Wrestling, of course, is a big game in itself, but it's also like a niche within a niche where it's like, all right, like we're not talking about wrestling. When we talk about wrestling for jiu-jitsu, we're not talking about, like college wrestling or scholastic wrestling or freestyle wrestling, whatever. You're still talking about top and bottom as well, where you're focusing on getting out from bottom, and then from top, you're talking about tilts, pinning combinations. Like we're erasing all that. Like just for jiu-jitsu, we're talking about just on our feet, just takedowns, right? So it truly is a niche within a niche. So I think for jiu-jitsu guys to get to that elite level where they can, a jiu-jitsu guy can go toe-to-toe with a Jordan Burroughs, a Kyle Dake, an NCAA national champion. It's gonna take I think a few more years, and the community getting better wrestlers, or even collegiate level or Olympic level wrestlers, learning jiu-jitsu to then understand what the limitations are in the wrestling aspect, to then teach that to the grapplers. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, it does. We saw some a few years ago now. We ended up seeing quite a handful of hybrid jiu-jitsu wrestling matches. I don't know if you remember those. It was like Gordon Ryan, I think, versus like Kyle Drake or something.
No, it was Gordon. Gordon went against Pat Downey.
Pat Downey, yeah.
Pat Downey.
Those are interesting matches, like kind of mixing it up a little bit. I was going to ask you on that point. I heard Travis Stevens recently got asked, it was on a podcast maybe a good year or so ago now, about whether a jiu-jitsu person should go over and do judo to try and learn a better stand-up game. And his answer was that no, he should just find a jiu-jitsu coach that understands the stand-up game and just learn it from them. How do you feel about that if it was a wrestling, if we changed judo up for wrestling?
Yeah, I mean, I understand where Travis is coming from. And I definitely agree. Now, I can't speak from the judo side, but at least from the wrestling side, yeah, you need to find someone, and you need to have someone that understands the jiu-jitsu game, right? That knows the limitations, the threats, the opportunities, like the whole SWOT analysis, right? Because you can get a college level or the best wrestler out there that's never done jiu-jitsu, and he's showing you takedowns that are awesome, but maybe your neck's in a way like for a guillotine, right? Your head's exposed, your neck's exposed, you're not falling to the right side of a certain way. Like, for example, you fall when someone wraps up a guillotine, if you continue falling to that same side, you're going to fall right into the guillotine, right? Leg over, or you jump over to the opposite side, right? Like, they're not going to know little details like that. And with other techniques as well, that can get you in trouble. So I definitely agree with Travis in regards to, not that finding a wrestling coach would be bad, but finding a jiu-jitsu coach that understands wrestling and good wrestling and how it can change and what adjustments you need to fit into the jiu-jitsu sport is going to be way better.
Amazing. So what are the things we can do as jiu-jitsu coaches to take maybe some of the, whether it's technical or mental aspects of wrestling, and implement them to what we do on the jiu-jitsu mats?
Yeah, I think what's going to have to happen is, I was thinking about it from more like a systematic approach, but realistically, looking at coaches that can get trained in some type of wrestling. Like, for example, I guess this is kind of a strange example, but you're looking at the big change or everyone talking about how police officers should be looking at being trained in jiu-jitsu, right? So they can understand how to control someone, et cetera. Maybe it's like, hey, if you're a school and you're looking to be one of the highest level schools, not only are you offering, wrestling, for example, or a wrestler in there teaching, but, maybe your coach is going through a 8 to 12 to 16 or 6-month crash course of learning wrestling from someone that already understands both sports. It's almost like a certification to say. Yeah. And then he has the credentials now where he can teach his students, right? So I think it almost needs to be that way to some degree, because like I said, you can get a just pure straight up wrestler in there, but next thing you know, you're taking some shots and getting anaconda, guillotine, and you're a little frustrated because you didn't learn. Hey, I need to know this adjustment. Why didn't you tell me?
Right. Interesting. When it comes to stand-up training, I think a lot of students sometimes feel a fair bit of fear, risk of injuries, things like that. Is there anything we can do when we're training that you think maybe taken from wrestling that we could implement to nullify that risk, or at least alleviate fear of the risk, maybe?
Yeah. It's a tough scenario because wrestling, I think, is just a little bit more demanding on the body in general. Like wrestling classes, for example, here, people definitely seem to be a little bit more winded and sweating and like even talking about like, oof, that wrestling class like really kicks your butt. And not that, jiu-jitsu is easy by any stretch, right? Or the classes are easier. But I think it's a little bit easier to maybe, and I think some people will disagree with me on this, depending on who you're going against. But I think it's a little bit easier sometimes to rest in jiu-jitsu, just with certain positional holds and certain positions in general. Wrestling, it's like, it's a constant movement from your feet, right? And if you're in a good stance and you're in a proper stance, which you should be, your legs are engaged, your hamstrings and your quads are firing because your legs are bent. So I feel like there's always a constant level of fatigue in wrestling that you need to build your body up to in the first place. But yeah, I have some students that are a little bit older, right? That do fear, hey, if I come to this class, am I going to get double legged and, slammed into the mat and get injured, or is there a higher risk of injury? I think the best way to prevent those injuries from happening, or to mitigate that, or to even make people feel better about it, like you said, kind of reduce the fear, is just, your job, or when I say your job, my job, your job too, is not only to teach techniques, but I think it's also not only generating that culture, but also being that coach and being that figure that's taking care of your students and setting them up for success by partnering up with the right partner. right? Like, I have a 21-year-old, 23-year-old competitor that, that's full-time and is looking to, just train 100% all the time. And, all his goal is just competition and winning every time. I'm not going to put him with a 43-year-old hobbyist, right? That's worried about getting injured. It's not going to make sense. So part of my job is kind of being that, for lack of a better word, I guess, authority figure, right? Where I'm partnering people with specific partners that I know are going to take care of them, and not look to hurt them. But there's only so much you can do, right? I mean, for example, someone came in yesterday with he had a few injuries he was kind of nursing. And I told him, listen, I'd be lying to tell you in jiu-jitsu, you're not going to get into a specific position that's going to, possibly crank your neck or possibly have you get stacked on your neck. It's my job to kind of mitigate that by putting you with folks I know can kind of flow roll with you and take care of you. But, at some point, you're getting yourself into a physical sport. So something might happen, but it's my job to try and mitigate it.
That's it. I'm always reminding adults and oftentimes the kids, especially the kids comp team, that, what we're doing is a combat sport and you're going to get knocks and bumps for sure. We can mitigate it as much as possible, but end of the day, it's kind of the nature of what we're doing.
Yeah.
Is in jiu-jitsu, there's I think, flow rolling is a thing, going 10, 20%, whatever it is, and just kind of not really hitting the submissions, but keep moving positions. Do they do a similar thing in wrestling, or is that not really done?
Yeah, no, you can go through a flow roll style on wrestling. A lot of people, there's two different aspects of it. Like hand fighting, for example, is one where you're just on your feet and you're just simply hand fighting, which is, really looking for specific, ties, inside tie, outside tie, head snaps, collar ties. And you're off balancing your opponent, looking for openings, and you're kind of flow rolling, in regards to just from your feet now in hand fighting, right? Like I said, maybe a snap, inside tie, moving to guy to the side, elbow passes, just looking for these openings, but you're not taking your shots. Now, if you're going through a full flow roll in the wrestling aspect, yeah, I mean, you can. It's just more you're wrestling at 50%, right? Or 60%. So you could, you can kind of flow roll from that side. It's funny you say that because when I was visiting B team down in Austin, Texas, Nicky Rod pulled me over. He's like, "Hey, want to just hand fight for a little bit and hand fight for a quick second?" And it probably lasted 25 seconds because class started once we started hand fighting 20 seconds in. But I remember just getting clubbed a few times in the head by Nicky Rod, and it just felt like I was getting pounded on the neck like a bear. I mean, it was funny. It was funny. I mean, Nicky Rod's huge, right? And also a great wrestler, but it was just funny. We're all right, we'll move around a little bit. And even just him flow rolling was just it felt like a massive club to the back of my head. So I thought that was pretty funny.
You think he's recently put out a hand fighting instructional as well, right?
I believe so. Yes. I mean, I think he's done maybe one or two from that side. But yeah, I mean, hand fighting is huge in wrestling. But to go back to your question, yeah, you can flow roll in wrestling. It's just, you gotta. I think regardless of flow rolling in jiu-jitsu or wrestling, you got to find someone with a little bit more experience because it's hard as a beginner to flow roll. It's oh yeah, I'll try, and then you're going 100%.
Right. Yeah. That's definitely a thing. You mentioned the guys down at B team. Obviously, they've got a big team going down to ADCC this year, which is traditionally the wrestling side of ADCC is massive, isn't it? You can't. It'd be super strange to see someone win ADCC that doesn't have pretty damn good wrestling these days, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, there are still some guys out there, I think, that definitely don't. Wrestle much, and they rely on their jiu-jitsu game significantly, but especially with the ADCC rule set, I mean, they're going to be at a disadvantage. And kind of even going back to, I mean, B team or ADCC and the merge and it's kind of putting it all together. I mean, the merge came at a great time too, right? Because wrestling, when I was a kid, for example, I always use this example because it's perfect and it's real history, right? I'll never forget Lloyd Irvin. Lloyd Irvin always saying that when he was fighting back in the day, and I'm going to guess, I apologize if I'm wrong. I'm going to guess that's 80s to maybe around the 80s, that time frame, or early 90s. But he always said when he was fighting back then in jiu-jitsu, he would fall back for leg locks. And he'd tap these guys out and win, and he would get booed. right? Because at that time it was like not respected, and it was kind of looked at as like, I don't know, just like, hey, like that's not real jiu-jitsu, or like, oh, you're falling back for a leg lock, like in a negative way. And then finally, like leg locks got their day, and like they're respected now, right? I feel like it was the same thing in wrestling where it's like, if you won a match 2-0, it was also not a respected thing where it's like, oh, you just wrestled the whole time, or oh, you just wrestled. All you know how to do is take someone down. And it kind of bothered me when I was younger, because I think that's I think that's BS basically, right? And I started off doing jiu-jitsu before wrestling, so everyone always looks at me being like, "Oh, you're a wrestler, or you wrestled." It's like I actually did jiu-jitsu for about 5-6 years before I started wrestling. But I think wrestling was the same aspect where it never got its respect, and then I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, it finally started to get its respect, and now Flo's on it, all these guys are on it. The top grapplers are on it, and now it's getting pushed now, like marketed. So I think it's crucial. I think it's finally gotten the respect it needs in the past few years. And I think people are finally starting to wake up and realize, man, like you got to know what to do from your feet now.
Absolutely. Like you said, I think you've nailed the timing on doing the merge and having that kind of stuff with the advent of wrestling being very much kind of in vogue. And there's so many cool aspects of it. Like I'm really big on, we don't get to train too much stand-up at the academy, to be honest, but I'm really big on wrestling up from guard, and I really love some of the breakdowns you've done, like some of Tynan Dalpera's stuff, going from like the Deli Heaver into the single leg and the dilemmas with that. I've then gone on to like just teach, like we've been doing something similar that week, and then I'm like, oh look, like this is something from that. How do you like to implement the wrestling up from guard? Is that something you use quite a bit as well?
I use it a little bit, right? I'm not always looking to wrestle up. I do like to kind of go for the traditional sweeps and actually get the full blown jiu-jitsu sweep. But I find myself wrestling up once in a while, especially from like, if it's like single leg X Dela Hiva, and someone's pushing down, the Dela Hiva leg to the hip and stepping over it into like the HQ position or headquarters, and then elevating them up, wrestling up from there. Or like the Tynan, right, where you're getting the far sleeve, pulling it off balance, and the guy wrestling up from there. But I mean, I would say wrestling up's not a massive thing in my game, but I do it.
It did feel a bit like a cheat code when I started doing it at first, because like instead of, even when we're doing like the stand-up stuff in the comp team class, I'd just be like, right, I could, someone's a lot bigger than me or something. Okay, I could try and, hand fire and beat the head position and get in on a leg or something. Or I could just kind of like get a grip, sit down, let them come towards me with like the good posture of like, okay, now I'm in.
Yeah, I definitely, folks can look at it like a cheat code, like you're saying. It definitely catches a lot of folks off guard because they're expecting like, all right, we're on the ground now. He's in a sweep, and next thing you know, like they're defending a single leg, and they're kind of confused. But the big thing you have to think about with wrestling up, which I might have talked about one of my breakdowns. Maybe I'll do another breakdown one day and talk about it further. But our big thing with like wrestling is like penetration step is like getting from point A to point B, right? Like if this is you and I'm here, if I just shoot, from out here and like I just spring off my toes, I'm going to be like this, right? And then it's like I'm almost already sprawled on, in that position to get sprawled on. But when I take a penetration step, the penetration step gets you from point A to point B while keeping you in good position, right? So like neck up, back up straight. So like you're moving in like this, right? The problem sometimes with wrestling up is that your posture is broken, right? Because as you're on your butt. So as you're kind of sitting up, you're kind of like a little C. So you have to really be weary of when you're wrestling up, like always getting in, almost think about even more about getting your posture up. A lot of guys will be in like a seated guard and they'll wrestle up, and then they're all curled up, their heads down. And then I see kids, people in class getting guillotined all the time trying to wrestle up. So you got to really think about that posture being up, especially when you're wrestling up.
For sure. Absolutely. How do you choose for the merge what you're going to break down?
So I try and stick to mostly like recent events or like most recent highlights. But really, as of recently, because there's, I'm on episode 97 tomorrow, going through a lot of footage. So if there's something I haven't done yet, I might go seek out like an old highlight or an old video. But honestly, it's kind of just shooting from the hip and just seeing what kind of pops up. You know, I'm on Instagram scrolling, Flow posts a really cool highlight. Like for example, like you said, the Tynan one, for example, when Tynan won Worlds, I mean, that highlight was everywhere of just like Tynan wins Worlds. And it's like him sweeping Ronaldo with that sweep, like everywhere. So I was like, you know what, like, let's do that. Let's do that breakdown. So typically I'd say 75% of them are from that. And then 25 are me kind of going proactively out there seeking new highlights. Yeah,
one of my favorite ones was right after the Kaynan Duarte beat Mateus Denise. You were throwing that the kind of throw by, is it slide by?
Yeah, the slide by. Did you mean sweep? Was that against? Oh yes, that was against Mateus. Okay, yeah, because then he did that.
I think he's hit it against someone else as well.
Rodolfo Vieira. That's the breakdown I did. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember you kind of redid that one like very recently after that one. I was like, oh, awesome. I wanted to figure out how he did that. He's really cool. Have you got anything special planned for episode 100?
You know what? I was looking at some breakdowns to do, because I'm gonna do some filming this weekend. And I'm doing the math in my head. I'm thinking like, oh, okay, that's gonna be episode 100. And I was like, oh man, I'm pretty lame. I have nothing special for episode 100. It's gonna be like just like a breakdown. I might do a breakdown of one of my techniques, like from a competition I was in. I guess that'll be a special 100. I mean, I've done a couple episodes of my techniques already. But right now, just between me kind of being packed or everything and busy, I don't think I'm gonna do anything too crazy. But I might make it just something, one of my highlights from competition.
I think that'd be really cool for sure. I mean, we're trying to get John Danaher for our episode 100 for the podcast, but it's not going very well.
Hey, you never know. Keep reaching out, you know?
That's it, yeah. Well, we keep just interviewing members of New Wave, just so we're like just in that area. Yeah. You never know. Yeah, for sure. Where do you think the YouTube channel is going to go? How do you think it's going to grow? Obviously, as it gets bigger and bigger, it takes more and more of your time if you want to keep getting stuff out.
Yeah, I mean, I try. Sometimes I think about where it can go and how big it can get. And first off, I'll tell you that I didn't start taking YouTube, which I'd say I kind of regret. Regret's not really a solid word though, because I've gotten a lot of traction on the Instagram route. But I only started taking YouTube serious in February this year, or not even February, I think March. Right. So we're talking about March, April, May, June, July. We're talking about 5 months, basically since I've been open at my gym, about me taking YouTube seriously. Right. When I was releasing episodes, it was, the website, because I have my own website, themergeonline.com. I was doing Facebook, the website, YouTube, Instagram. So there's like 4 streams of stuff. So I kind of had to choose like, hey, do I want to, funnel everything into one platform, but then not get like traction elsewhere? Or do I want to just get it all out there so everyone can see and then just see where it kind of goes? I chose the latter. So it was kind of hard because all my subscribers and viewers and everything was kind of spread thin against multiple platforms. Yeah. And of course, Instagram got the biggest traction, right? Where it was, I don't know, a year and whatever. We're at like 20K now, followers. But yeah, then I started realizing like, oh, YouTube, I should get that up, build that up further. So really 5 months ago, that's where I made the heavy shift of, hey, you know what? Now we're gonna do full episodes on YouTube, and then Instagram will be more of like the teasers and more of just like random reels every day, stuff like that. But where it can go, I mean, I'm not, I don't really know, right? I mean, if I think about where it can go and how big it can get and everything I need to do, it's gonna be like overwhelming for me. But I just take it day by day and just see what happens, right? I mean, I look back when I was on episode 10, 20, 30, 40. And I was always like, what's next? What's happening? Do I have enough? And it just worked its way out. Now I'm on episode 97. Yeah. So it's just kind of going with the flow, see what happens. And, what I would love, which is, such a pipe dream, I feel like, at first I was looking at like flow and stuff like that. But I mean, if the merge could eventually be like a ESPN sports, something like that, right? Like that'd be awesome, right? Like not saying I'm going to be a ESPN anchor, but if the merge turned to like the household, like, hey, you want to learn certain techniques or wrestling for jiu-jitsu, or hey, you want to have someone like break down a newest highlight, like it's like, hey, the Yankees win a game tomorrow, that night they're on ESPN, right? And it's like the highlights, what happened, how they did, the score. Like if I could eventually be that guy where it's going through the most recent match, nice, and all the highlights and what they have done, I mean, that'd be awesome. But I mean, you're talking like up highest level there, you know?
Yeah, like an expert panelist.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like the DC, the DC, like, DC and UFC of like the DC of jiu-jitsu, right? Jiu-jitsu and wrestling. So
that's amazing. Yeah, I can totally see Flo going for something like that as well, actually. Do you feel, how much time do you personally spend between Ghee and Nogi?
It's pretty even. At my school, there's 17 classes a week. Well, it's technically 19, but 2 are open mat. So I just say 17. And I really think it's split. It's probably almost half and half, or probably one class, since 17 is not an even number. It's probably like, I don't know. It's probably like 8 or 9 or something like that, or 7 or 8, something like that classes. But no, I like, it's funny because I like both, right? Because, in Nogi, my style in general, right, especially more from a competitive aspect when I'm out there competing, is very top pressure, right? So get the takedown, top pressure pass, or just top pressure in general, get the pass, search for the submission, right? And that's definitely in a Nogi perspective as well. When it comes to more Ghee, like I love playing the bottom game. So I love going, like I love De La Hiva, deep De La Hiva, get into all different sweeps from there, deep half, which is like super old school game. I love deep half too. But like long story short, in Ghee, I love playing bottom in Ghee, right? Nogi, I don't do it as much. So I love rolling both in general. I always have, just because they are truly 2 different games for me, right?
A while ago, we heard Gordon Ryan saying, like the Ghee is going to be dead in like 10 years or something. And I don't know if he's right, but it feels like definitely Nogi has a marketing department in the Nogi. It feels like it's much more accessible to people. What do you feel about that?
I think I don't think it'll totally go away, right? I don't think it'll be totally dead, as Gordon might be saying. Not saying he's wrong. Maybe he's right. I don't know. But I think there's always going to be the sport aspect of it, right? And there's always going to be, like going back, for example, right? Not most, but, a lot of folks I know that are hobbyists in their 40s and 50s prefer Ghee, right? Yeah. Because they have the grips, they can slow folks down. They feel it's a little bit safer for them. I feel like there's that stereotype with Nogi where, and it may not be stereotype in a bad way. I'm saying just, it's faster paced. It's harder to slow folks down. And once again, you see a lot of those middle-aged 40, 50-year-olds that care about being healthy, going home, playing with their kids and going to their day job. And, they want to do it once or twice a week and they have nothing to prove. They try and sometimes steer away from Nogi. Right. I'm not saying that's totally the case, but, historically through my 20 years of doing this, 25 years, I've always kind of heard that. Right. So I think no matter what, if you're talking for like, I don't know, young 20, 25-year-old competitors, especially with the way Flo's like pumping out, like, hey, Nogi, sure. Maybe it'll be more popular for them and the general community, especially if you're looking to make it an Olympic sport where, average folks that have no idea what the sport is can watch it and think, okay, I understand this, instead of someone going through like a reverse Della Worm guard and someone's watching, it's like, what is even going on? But no, I think from a competitive perspective, I think Nogi will continue to kind of rise and take off, but I think the Ghee will always be there, especially for more of the average, just hobbyists.
Yeah, I think you're right. I agree. Why is it you think people become so obsessed with jiu-jitsu?
Maybe just the aspect of, that they feel it's it is a self-defense, right? It is a self-defense. It is a way of defending yourself if you need to, God forbid, on the street. But I think there's some kind of maybe feeling with that of just like, hey, there's this self-defense mechanism that I've mastered, right? Or I want to master, so I can just become this person that can handle himself against. Anyway, I think there's certain like love and obsession with like being able to like physically manipulate and control someone in the human chess match. It's like if you told someone like, hey, do you want to be able to, physically control and manipulate and submit anyone you want, anytime you want, no matter how big or small they are? It's like, well, that sounds interesting. You got me hooked. You got me, you got my attention. Like, what's up,
That's actually what our next ad copy is going to be, I think.
Exactly. That'd be a great YouTube title, right? It's like clickbait. But no, I think that's where people, because like I said, it is a self-defense, right? And it is a mechanism of defending yourself. And I think if you could master that and then have the confidence of being able to handle yourself or even just have fun, it's like, listen, if I can go out there and roll, not from a competitive aspect, more from, in the gym with friends and teammates, if I can just roll and, master this art and be able to physically control someone and submit them, anytime I want, like, that's cool.
Absolutely, man. We briefly mentioned some of the values that you get from martial arts near the start of this conversation. For you, what does it mean to be a martial artist? What are the kind of values we're trying to refine and distill?
Yeah, I mean, from an early age, as I mentioned in my old school, like every from a very young age, 5 until about, I think it was like 12 or 13, every belt had like a not a phrase, like a word, right? It was like honesty, discipline, respect, valor, honor. I probably missed a couple, integrity. And I think, naturally you learn those through being a martial artist and working with folks, and also from the teachings of your coach as well, right? I think as a martial artist, you kind of learn, the humble aspect of it, the respect factor, and many other values. And I think having a coach that can also teach you that and introduce that to you, and put that into you, is very helpful as well, right? You want to make sure, you're learning, like I said, kind of comparing it to like a weapon, you are being given a skill that can really hurt someone. And, it's almost like a Marvel movie where you see like the bad guy and he's really powerful. It's like, if you're a jiu-jitsu black belt and you're a bad guy going on the street, just picking fights, like that's pretty bad. And that's pretty dangerous that, you're out there having the ability you have, but using it in a negative way. So I think learning martial arts and having those abilities and understanding, the power of it, what you can do, how to respect people, and, carrying yourself in a certain way, I think is big.
Amazing. Kind of one of the last questions we'll ask, but for you, for wrestling and jiu-jitsu, I guess, do they skew more towards martial arts? Is it more combat sports? Is it just normal sports? I guess particularly for wrestling, but where does that fit in?
Are you saying like, I guess, what genre would wrestling kind of fall into? You're saying?
Yeah. Do we consider in the States, is wrestling considered a martial art, or is it just considered like combat sport, or where is it?
That's a good question. I don't think I've ever been asked that. I would definitely consider wrestling a martial art. I think for me, coming from a martial art perspective, I think if you ask a wrestler, is wrestling a martial art, they would say no. I truly think that a wrestler would probably say no. They would probably say it's more of a sport or combat sport. But it's tough though, right? Jiu-jitsu is a martial art, right? And you're not throwing strikes, but then you're going back to like the old school Gracies when it's like, hey, we're doing self-defense with strikes involved, right? Or like how to defend strikes. So I think, long story short, in my opinion, coming from my background, I think wrestling is a martial art. I think it can be considered a martial art. Also sport related too.
Amazing. Usually the last thing we'll ask is if there's anyone in the jiu-jitsu, or I guess even in the wrestling community, that you think we should reach out to and have a conversation with to just kind of help build the community, or they've got a good story to tell. Is there anyone we should reach out to have them on the podcast?
Yeah. From the jiu-jitsu aspect, you guys might know I'm really good friends with Gianni Grippo. I've known Gianni Grippo for a very long time, since we were kids competing together. He's got a great story, right? Him and I both been training since we've been very young. His, not only his success, but his growth is etched in the history of the sport, especially now being a 2-time world champion. But there's a lot of folks I can name. Even just another guy I'm thinking about from the top of my head that used to train with us. This guy, Adam, he moved here from Italy, actually, to train with the Meows and Gianni. Nice. When we kind of had the team together during like the quarantine, or the quarantine still exists, but during the crazy phases of COVID. He wanted to take his jiu-jitsu for the next level, like left his family in Italy. He's training with us now, or training with them, and on the quarantine side, I'm saying them now because I open my own gym, and unfortunately I don't get as many roles as I used to with them, which I was doing every day. But worked his way up to being a blue belt world champion, right? I'm not sure what he thought is where he was going to go into sport, but you know, he always talks about how it went from here to here, right? In just a couple months of him training with them. So, I mean, he's someone that I kind of saw his growth when he first started the team to where he's at now. And it's just night and day. It was beautiful to kind of see the transformation of him coming where he was and then rolling with him 2, 3, 4, 5 months later under the tutelage of them. And you're just like, whoa, like this guy's just a different level now.
Wow, amazing. Cool. Yeah, we'll definitely reach out. I'll try to get Adam's Instagram handle off you, and I'll reach out to Gianni too. Well, thanks so much for doing this, Professor. I really appreciate your time. I know how busy you must be running a school and a channel and everything like that. But thanks so much for sharing your story with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the show. And yeah, stay tuned for tomorrow. We have a good episode coming out tomorrow.
Legendary. And I'll put all the links for the merge and the website and the Instagram in the description. Is there anything else we should put out in there? Your school, what's the name of the school?
My school here is Trasso, Jiu-Jitsu and Wrestling. So very, very straightforward and what we teach.
Amazing. Cool. I'd love to speak to you again someday, Professor, or come visit you out in the States. If you're ever here in the UK, you've got to come down for sure.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks again, guys. And
thanks, Professor.
It was great talking with you.
Take care. See you.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Thanks, guys.